My fiancé humiliated me at family dinner. He's ridiculously controlling because he knows I'm too good for him. I deserve better than this jealous loser. She sneered, real women don't ask permission to live their lives. Then disappeared to Cabo with her ex. She returned to an empty apartment and waiting handcuffs. All right, Reddit. I need to get this off my chest because what happened 2 months ago still feels like I'm living in some alternate reality. I've, 30 male, been with my fiancée Chloe, 27 female, for 5 years total. We got engaged 8 months ago, been living together for 2.5 years. I genuinely thought we had our shit figured out, you know? Like we were that couple that was actually gonna make it. Quick background on us. I work in tech sales, make decent money, pretty stable life. Chloe works in marketing, but her company's been struggling, so her hours and pay got cut pretty bad about a year ago. I've been covering most of our expenses since then, which honestly wasn't a big deal. When you're planning to marry someone, you figure that's just how it works sometimes. One person carries more weight when the other's going through rough patches. So 2 weeks ago, Chloe comes home from work with this energy I hadn't seen in months. Like genuinely excited about something, bouncing around the kitchen while I'm making dinner. She'd been weird for maybe a week before this. Constantly on her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't show me, that whole thing. I figured work stress, or maybe planning something for my birthday next month. But no, turns out she was excited about Blake, her ex. And before you ask, yeah, I knew about Blake. Hard not to when your girl dated someone for 3 years, right before you. Dude's everything you'd expect. Tall, good-looking, drives a BMW, works in real estate. One of those guys who probably peaked in college, but still acts like he's hot shit because he can afford bottle service. So apparently Blake's company does these big sales competitions every quarter, and this time the grand prize was a 5-day trip to Cabo. All expenses paid at some resort that probably costs more per night than I make in a week. Real nice setup, oceanfront suite, unlimited everything, the works. Here's where it gets interesting. Blake won the contest, but his girlfriend Chelsea had dumped him about a month before. So now he's got this romantic getaway for two with nobody to take. And guess who's the first person he thinks to invite? My fiancé. Chloe told me about this like she was announcing what we were having for dinner. Just casual as hell, like it was the most normal thing in the world. She's going through Blake's messages on her phone, showing me pictures of the resort, talking about how the weather's supposed to be perfect this week. The whole time I'm standing there with a spatula in my hand thinking, is this actually happening right now? When I asked if she was seriously considering going on a romantic vacation with her ex-boyfriend, she looked at me like I'd just asked if the sky was blue. Of course she was considering it. It was a free trip to Cabo. Why wouldn't she want to go? I tried explaining that most people would see a problem with their engaged partner going away with an ex for 5 days. That it wasn't really about trust, it was about respect and boundaries. That there's a difference between being controlling and having normal expectations in a relationship. She hit me with every classic line in the book. I was being insecure. I was being controlling. Blake was just being nice, offering her a free vacation. They were completely over each other. Had been for years. What was the big deal? She even threw in some stuff about how I should trust her more and how healthy relationships don't involve policing your partner's friendships. The thing is, I do trust Chloe, or I did. But this wasn't about trust. It was about judgment. What kind of person thinks it's appropriate to go on a couple's vacation with their ex when they're engaged to someone else? What kind of person doesn't immediately see why their partner would be uncomfortable with that? The conversation went downhill pretty fast after that. She got defensive, then annoyed, then straight up angry that I wasn't being supportive of her getting a free vacation. I stayed calm through most of it because that's just how I am, but inside I was losing my mind. We're supposed to be planning a wedding and she wants to go play house with her ex in Mexico. By the end of the night, we weren't really talking. She'd made it pretty clear she was going to do whatever she wanted, regardless of how I felt about it. But I went to bed thinking the conversation wasn't over, that maybe she'd sleep on it and realize how messed up the whole situation was. I mean, we were engaged. That had to count for something, right? Wrong. So wrong. The next day was Wednesday, and we had my parents' 30th anniversary dinner planned. Big family thing. My mom had been organizing it for months. I figured maybe being around family would put things in perspective for Chloe. Remind her that we were supposed to be building something together. Instead, she used it as an opportunity to publicly humiliate me. My entire family was coming. Parents, obviously. My older sister Katie with her husband Dave. My younger brother Matt, who drove down from Jacksonville. Even my 78-year-old grandma made the trip from Tampa. This was supposed to be a celebration, you know? One of those nice family memories you look back on years later. Chloe seemed off from the moment we walked into my parents' house. Usually, she's pretty good with my family. She knows how to work a room, makes conversation, helps my mom in the kitchen. But that night, she was quiet during the pre-dinner drinks, barely touched the appetizers my mom had spent all afternoon making, and kept checking her phone under the table, like she was waiting for something important. I should have known something was brewing. She had this look on her face like she was planning something, but I was too focused on trying to enjoy the evening to really pay attention. My dad was telling stories about when he and mom first got married. Grandma was roasting everyone like she always does. Matt was showing us pictures from his new job. Normal family stuff. About halfway through dinner, my mom started asking about our future plans. This is pretty standard territory for family gatherings. When are you getting married? Where's the wedding going to be? Do you want kids? All that. Usually, I deflect with jokes, or we give vague answers about still planning things out. No big deal, just parents being parents. But this time, instead of our usual routine, Chloe put down her fork and let out this really loud sigh. Like, loud enough that everyone stopped talking and looked at her. Then she started going off about toxic masculinity and controlling behavior in relationships. Why do some men always think they can dictate what their girlfriends do? She said, cutting her roast beef like she was discussing the weather. It's like they believe having a relationship means owning someone. So exhausting dealing with guys who get threatened by the most basic social interactions. She kept going while the entire table sat in stunned silence. It's honestly pathetic how insecure some men get when their partner has any kind of independence. Like, healthy relationships require trust, not constant paranoia about every friendship. The whole time she's saying this stuff, she's acting completely casual, even smiling at me across the table a couple times, like she thought she was making some brilliant point I needed to hear. The entire table went dead silent. My dad stopped chewing mid-bite and just stared at her. My grandma looked confused as hell, probably trying to figure out what any of this had to do with anniversary dinners. Katie's eyes went wide like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Even Dave, who's usually pretty quiet at family things, put down his fork and was just watching this unfold. My mom tried to salvage the situation by asking if everything was okay with us, but Chloe just said she was speaking generally about relationship dynamics. Speaking generally. At my parents' anniversary dinner, about toxic men and controlling behavior, while looking directly at me. The rest of dinner was probably the most awkward hour of my life. Nobody knew what to say or how to respond to what had just happened. My mom kept trying to change the subject back to family stuff, but the damage was done. Matt kept glancing between me and Chloe like he was watching a car accident. Even my dad, who's usually pretty good at diffusing tension, seemed completely lost. When dessert came out, Chloe suddenly got all chatty again, like nothing had happened. Started asking my grandma about her garden and complimenting my mom on the meal, acting like she hadn't just spent 10 minutes publicly humiliating me for having basic relationship boundaries. The drive home was painfully quiet, the kind of silence that makes your own thoughts feel loud enough to shatter the windows. I swear I must have looked at her reflection in the side mirror 50 times, waiting for her to just say something. But nope, she just stared out the window like she was in some indie film montage about heartbreak, except I was the only one confused. When we finally pulled into the lot, she just grabbed her purse and walked ahead like she hadn't just set my entire family's opinion of me on fire over mashed potatoes. I followed her up, unlocked the door, and we did this awkward dance around each other in the kitchen. I watched her put her leftovers in the fridge, like that was the pressing issue here. I couldn't take it anymore, so I just came out with it. What was that dinner speech supposed to accomplish? My voice probably cracked, but I didn't care at that point. She didn't even turn around. She just shrugged, opened the fridge again like the answer was in there next to the ketchup. Nothing. I was just making conversation, you know? Making conversation. Right. Like telling my mom and dad and my sister that I don't let you breathe without permission is normal small talk. Totally casual. Like, hey guys, pass the salt. Oh, by the way, your son's basically a dictator in sweatpants. So I called her on it. I told her straight up. It sounded like she was trying to talk about Blake without having the guts to say Blake's name. She spun around, rolled her eyes like I just asked her why the sky's blue. You're being paranoid, she snapped. Not everything's about you. Not everything's about me. So why did the whole speech sound like it was exactly about me? She can't just blast me with that at family dinner and then pretend she's on some moral talk show about strong women and weak men. I told her the timing was a little too perfect. She acted like she didn't even remember that I'd told her 2 days ago. I wasn't okay with her taking a Cabo trip with Blake. She huffed and mumbled something about me needing to get over my insecurities, which is rich, coming from the same person who reads my phone over my shoulder when I text my coworker about actual work. We just stood there, her arms crossed, leaning against the counter like she owned the place. Me trying to figure out how someone can look you dead in the eye and tell you you're crazy when you know exactly what you heard. And the worst part? She didn't apologize. Didn't even try to spin it nicely. She just stood there waiting for me to drop it like I always do. Looking back, I think she was trying to make me the bad guy, before doing something she knew was wrong. Like if she could paint me as controlling and insecure in front of my family, then whatever she did next would be justified. Classic manipulation move. Make your partner look unreasonable so your unreasonable behavior seems normal. But here's what really gets me. I actually started doubting myself that night. Lying in bed wondering if maybe I was being controlling. Maybe I was being insecure. Maybe normal couples would be totally fine with their partners going on romantic vacations with their exes. That's how good she was at this shit. She had me questioning my own sanity over basic relationship boundaries. I went to sleep that night thinking the whole dinner disaster had put things in perspective for her. After embarrassing both of us like that, surely she'd realize the Cabo trip was a bad idea. We went to bed without talking about Blake again, but I figured after what happened at dinner, there was no way she'd actually go through with it. Man, was I wrong about that too. So Thursday morning, I woke up around 7 a.m. to an empty bed. At first, I figured Chloe had just gotten up early for work or maybe went for a run. She'd been doing that weird early morning workout thing lately, so an empty bed wasn't immediately suspicious. But something felt off about the whole apartment. I got up to make coffee and noticed her side of the closet looked different. Not empty, but definitely missing stuff. Like when someone packs for a trip but tries to make it look like they didn't take much. Her favorite dresses were gone, the good makeup bag, her fancy sandals. The bathroom was the same thing, missing just enough toiletries to cover a long weekend, but not obvious enough to notice unless you really looked. That's when it hit me. The flight to Cabo was this morning. I checked my phone thinking maybe she'd left a note or sent a message explaining what was happening. Nothing. No text, no missed calls, no sticky note on the fridge. She'd just vanished. Around 11 a.m., my phone finally buzzed. Just landed in Cabo. Weather's perfect already, with a picture attached. It was a selfie of her and Blake at what looked like the airport, both wearing sunglasses and grinning like idiots on vacation. Blake had his arm around her shoulders, and she was leaning into him like they were already a couple again. I stared at that message for probably 10 straight minutes. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. She'd actually done it. After everything we talked about, after that disaster at my parents' dinner, after 5 years together and 6 months of being engaged, she'd snuck out at dawn and flew to Mexico with her ex-boyfriend. No conversation, no heads up, no consideration for how I might feel about waking up to find my fiancé gone. Just a cheery little vacation update like she was texting me from the grocery store. My hands were legitimately shaking when I called her. Straight to voicemail. Her phone was probably on airplane mode or turned off completely. I tried 3 more times over the next hour. Same thing every time. Straight to that generic voicemail message. The Instagram stories started almost immediately. By noon, she was posting sunset shots from their resort balcony, fancy cocktails by an infinity pool, her and Blake at some beachside restaurant that probably cost more for lunch than most people spend on groceries in a week. In every picture where Blake appeared, they looked way too comfortable together. His hand on her back, her laughing at something he said, both of them looking tanned and relaxed like they'd been together for years. I called in sick to work because there was no way I could concentrate on anything. Spent most of Thursday just sitting in our apartment, refreshing her social media and trying to wrap my head around what was happening. Every new post felt like another punch in the gut. Here's us at the beach. Here's our amazing dinner. Here's Blake being so funny and charming. By Thursday afternoon, I was going through this weird mix of emotions. Part of me was angry, like genuinely furious that she'd just bail on our relationship for a vacation with her ex. Part of me was hurt because this was supposed to be the woman I was going to marry, and she'd chosen some other guy over me without even a conversation. But there was also this cold, analytical part of my brain that was starting to see the situation clearly. This wasn't some impulsive decision or miscommunication. She'd planned this whole thing, probably booked the flight days ago, and just been waiting for the right moment to execute her plan. The family dinner speech about toxic men wasn't random. It was her setting up justification for what she was about to do. She'd packed her bags, set her alarm, and snuck out before I woke up because she knew she was doing something completely messed up. The woman I was supposed to marry had just chosen her ex-boyfriend over me and didn't even have the guts to tell me to my face. Thursday evening around 6 p.m., my phone finally rang. Chloe's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Look, I know you're upset, but this isn't what you think. Blake and I are just friends. This is just a vacation. Just a vacation. With her ex-boyfriend. In a couple's suite. While we were engaged. Is that what you're telling yourself? Don't be like this. You're being paranoid again. We're not doing anything wrong. I hung up. She called back twice, but I let it go to voicemail. Whatever she had to say, I wasn't interested in hearing it. Thursday evening, I started doing something I probably should have done months ago, really looking at our relationship with clear eyes. All the times she'd dismissed my concerns about stuff, made me feel crazy for having normal expectations, prioritized other people's feelings over mine. The way she'd handle conflict by making me feel like I was being unreasonable, instead of actually addressing the problem. Like 6 months ago, when her coworker Jake kept texting her late at night and I mentioned it made me uncomfortable. Instead of setting boundaries with Jake, she told me I was being insecure and possessive, or when she'd make plans with friends without checking if we had anything going on, then get annoyed when I pointed out we'd talked about doing something together that night. I'd been making excuses for her behavior for years, telling myself she was just independent or strong-willed. But really, she was just selfish. She did whatever she wanted and expected me to be okay with it, because I loved her. The Cabo thing wasn't an anomaly. It was the natural progression of how she'd been treating our relationship all along. Friday morning, I woke up to more Instagram stories. Her and Blake doing some couples massage thing at the resort spa. Both of them in matching robes, looking relaxed and happy. The caption was something about treating yourself to the good life, with a bunch of heart emojis. That's when I realized she wasn't just disrespecting our relationship, she was flaunting it. Posting this shit publicly where all our friends and her family could see it, making it obvious to everyone that she was on a romantic vacation with another man while engaged to me. She wanted people to see this. She wanted me to see this. Maybe she thought it would make me jealous enough to fight for her, or maybe she just didn't give a shit about how it looked. Either way, it showed me exactly how much she respected me and our relationship, which was not at all. Friday afternoon, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity and definitely saved my future. Instead of sitting around waiting for her to come back so we could have some big dramatic conversation about what this meant, I decided to take action. If Chloe wanted to act like she was single, I was going to help her out with that. But first, I needed to figure out exactly what I was dealing with financially and legally. Because something told me this situation was about to get a lot more complicated than just a cheating fiancé. So the next day, I'm sitting in my apartment when my phone rings around 9 a.m. It's Sarah from my company's finance department, which is weird because I've maybe talked to her twice in the 3 years I've worked there. Hey Simon, sorry to bother you, but we're doing our quarterly audit of corporate credit card expenses, and I have some questions about charges on your account. At first, I figured it was just routine stuff. Maybe some receipt was missing or a client dinner looked weird in the system. But Sarah's tone was off, like she was trying to be professional, but something was bothering her. Can you walk me through some of these business meal charges from the past few months? Some of them seem unusual. That's when my stomach dropped. About a year ago, when Chloe's job situation got shaky and money was tight, I'd added her as an authorized user on my corporate card. It was supposed to be for emergencies only. Maybe the occasional lunch if she was meeting with potential clients for her marketing work. I figured it would help her network and maybe land some freelance stuff while her company figured their shit out. Apparently, that was a massive mistake. Sarah started reading off charges from the past 4 months. $3,200 total. Spa treatments at places I'd never heard of. Expensive dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford on my own salary. Shopping trips to boutiques that definitely weren't serving business clients. All of it marked in the system as client meetings or business development. The worst part? Half of these charges lined up perfectly with Chloe's Instagram posts from the past few months. That fancy brunch place she'd posted about with her girlfriends? Charged to my company as a client meeting? The day spa where she got those expensive treatments for her birthday? Business expense. Those designer shoes she'd been showing off on social media? Apparently a necessary purchase for client relations. Sarah was being professional about it, but I could tell she was basically asking if I'd been using company money for personal expenses, which technically I had, just not knowingly. She explained that the finance team had flagged the account because the spending pattern didn't match my usual business activities, and some of the vendor categories were way outside normal business expenses. The company requires us to investigate any unusual spending patterns, she said. Can you provide receipts and documentation for these charges showing they were legitimate business expenses? I told her I'd need to check my records and get back to her, but inside I was freaking out. Not only had my fiancée just ditched me for her ex, but she'd been systematically stealing from my employer for months, and I was the one who was going to get fired if I couldn't prove these were legitimate business expenses. After I hung up with Sarah, I went through my emails looking for any communication with Chloe about these charges. found a few texts where she'd mentioned grabbing lunch with potential clients or attending networking events, but nothing that would hold up to actual scrutiny. No business cards exchanged, no follow-up meetings scheduled, no contracts signed, just expensive meals and shopping trips disguised as work expenses. The more I dug into it, the clearer it became that Chloe had been straight up lying to me about what these charges were for. That $300 spa day wasn't networking with a potential client. It was her monthly girls' day with her sister and friends. That $150 dinner at the steakhouse wasn't a business meeting. It was her birthday celebration that I'd somehow missed paying for. She'd been living off my company's money while telling me she was trying to drum up business for herself. And the worst part was how casual she'd been about it. Like using someone else's corporate credit card for personal expenses was just a normal thing people did. I called Sarah back and told her I needed to report potential unauthorized use of the company card. She connected me with the legal department, who scheduled a meeting for Monday morning. They also sent me a packet of forms to fill out for filing a police report, because apparently corporate credit card fraud is a pretty serious crime. Spending the weekend knowing I was about to turn in my own fiancé for fraud was surreal as hell. Part of me felt guilty, like maybe I should give her a chance to explain or pay the money back. But then I'd refresh Instagram and see another photo of her and Blake looking like they were on their honeymoon, and I'd remember that she was currently on vacation with another man while I dealt with the legal consequences of her stealing. Friday afternoon, I called my buddy Maxwell, who owns a moving company. Maxwell and I went to college together, and he's one of those guys who's always down to help out when shit hits the fan. I told him I needed a favor and would pay whatever it took for weekend service. "What's the situation?" he asked. "I need to move, fast, like everything packed and out by Sunday." Maxwell didn't ask too many questions, which I appreciated. Just told me he could have a truck and 2 guys available Saturday morning, and we'd figure out the details later. See, here's the thing about our living situation that I'd never really thought about before. The apartment lease was signed by both of us, but I'd been paying 100% of the rent since Chloe's hours got cut. Same with utilities, internet, groceries, everything. On paper, we were equal tenants, but in reality, she'd been completely financially dependent on me for months, which gave me an idea for how to handle this situation. Instead of trying to kick her out or fighting over who gets to stay, I was going to leave her with the whole mess to deal with on her own. Friday evening, I started going through the apartment and figuring out what belonged to whom. Turns out most of our stuff was actually mine from before we moved in together. The TV, the couch, the bed, the kitchen appliances, even most of the furniture. Chloe had moved in with basically just clothes and some decorative stuff. The plan was simple: pack up everything that was mine, move it to a new place, and leave Chloe to figure out how to afford an empty apartment on her call center salary. No drama, no big confrontation, just the natural consequences of her choices. Saturday morning, I found a furnished month-to-month place across town. Nothing fancy, but it was available immediately, and I could afford the deposit without touching any joint accounts. Signed the lease, got the keys, and was ready to execute my plan. By Saturday afternoon, I was feeling something I hadn't felt in days: actual control over my situation. Instead of sitting around waiting for Chloe to come back so we could have some tearful conversation about what her vacation meant for our relationship, I was taking decisive action. She wanted to act like she was single? Perfect. I was about to help her with that in ways she wasn't expecting. Saturday morning started early. Maxwell showed up at 8 a.m. sharp with his truck and 2 guys I recognized from other jobs. I'd already spent Friday night boxing up my personal stuff, so we were ready to rock and roll. First stop was the bank. I walked in when they opened and had what was probably the most satisfying conversation of my adult life with the customer service rep. Removed Chloe as an authorized user on every single account: checking, savings, both credit cards. Took her off my car insurance, my phone plan, even canceled the Netflix and Spotify accounts she'd been using. While I was at the bank, Maxwell and his guys started loading the truck. By noon, we had everything loaded up. The apartment went from looking like a home to looking like a very expensive empty shell in about 3 hours. Maxwell kept asking if I was sure about this. "You know she's going to lose her mind when she gets back, right? That's the point. And you're really not going to give her any warning?" She didn't give me any warning when she snuck out to go with her ex in Mexico. That shut him up pretty quick. Saturday afternoon, I went back to the old apartment to handle the utilities. Called the electric company, gas company, internet provider. Everything was in my name anyway, so canceling was easy. The customer service reps all asked if I wanted to transfer service to another tenant at the address. "Nope, just cancel everything." "Sir, this will leave the apartment without power or internet. Are you sure the other tenant doesn't want to take over the accounts?" "Not my problem." By 6 p.m., the apartment was going to be a very expensive empty box with no electricity, no gas, no internet, and no TV to distract from how quiet and depressing it was. Exactly what Chloe deserved to come home to. The lease situation was interesting. Both our names were on it, but I'd been paying 100% of the rent for the past 8 months since her hours got cut. Legally, we were both responsible for it, but practically I was the only one keeping us from getting evicted. I wasn't going to break the lease or try to get out of it early. That would have been too complicated and potentially expensive. Instead, I was just going to stop paying rent and let Chloe deal with the consequences. She wanted to make adult decisions without consulting me. She could handle adult responsibilities without my help. Saturday evening, I sat in my new apartment eating pizza and setting up my electronics. My phone was blowing up with notifications from Chloe's Instagram. More vacation photos, more shots of her and Blake looking like they were having the time of their lives. I turned my phone face down and focused on getting my new place set up. For the first time in days, I felt calm. Not happy exactly, but like I was finally taking control of a situation that had been driving me crazy. Sunday morning, I went back to the old apartment one last time. I left Chloe's engagement ring on the kitchen counter along with a note. Hope Cabo was worth it. Good luck with the rent. Simon. Short and to the point. No anger, no long explanation, no emotional manipulation, just the facts. The beauty of my plan was that Chloe wouldn't know anything was wrong until she got home. She'd spend her entire vacation thinking she was getting away with something, posting photos and having fun while I sat at home like a chump. Meanwhile, her whole life was getting systematically dismantled without her having any idea. Sunday afternoon, I had my meeting prep ready for Monday morning with the company's legal team. All the credit card statements printed out, screenshots of her Instagram posts, showing her at these places during supposed business meetings, even text messages where she'd lied about what the charges were for. The legal team had been very clear about what they needed for the police report. Documentation of unauthorized use, proof that the charges weren't legitimate business expenses, evidence that the authorized user had deliberately misrepresented the nature of the charges. I had all of that and more. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Monday morning, I walked into my company's legal department with everything organized. The legal team was all business. They went through each fraudulent charge. Every charge had been processed as a business expense, with fake client codes. I'd only authorized emergency use, but she'd been systematically stealing for months and documenting it all on social media like an idiot. They explained they had to file a police report for fraud, over $1,000. We'll have the warrant ready when she gets back Sunday. The evidence was rock solid. She'd basically built her own case against herself. I left the meeting feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time since this whole mess started, I wasn't the one dealing with consequences for someone else's shitty decisions. Chloe had made her choices, and now she was going to face the results. The rest of the week was probably the most peaceful I'd felt in months. I focused on work, got settled in my new apartment, and started actually enjoying my life again. Sunday evening around 6 p.m., I was at home making dinner when my phone started going crazy. I'd had it turned off for most of the weekend because I didn't want to deal with whatever drama was coming. I turned my phone back on for the first time in 2 days. 47 missed calls, 60-plus text messages. The progression was exactly what you'd expect. Confusion, then panic, then anger, then complete meltdown. The first few texts were just questions. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? Something's wrong with the apartment. Then it escalated. The power's out and the internet isn't working. Half our stuff is missing. What happened here? The final messages were just desperate. Please just call me back. I don't know what to do. I can't afford this place by myself. Jenny, Chloe's sister, had been texting me too. Chloe's having a complete breakdown. She says you moved out? What the hell happened? She's at my place crying. I called Jenny back around 8 p.m. She was completely freaking out about Chloe coming home to find the apartment empty and having a breakdown for the past 2 hours. I explained that we'd broken up and I'd moved out while she was on vacation. That's when things got interesting. Jenny had no idea Chloe had gone to Cabo with Blake. Apparently, Chloe had told her whole family it was a work retreat. When I mentioned that her work retreat was actually a romantic getaway with her ex-boyfriend, Jenny went dead silent. She was shocked that Blake was even involved. I told her Chloe had called me controlling for not being comfortable with the trip, then left anyway. So I ended our engagement and moved out. Jenny admitted she had no idea about any of this. Chloe had been lying to everyone about what the trip really was. Around 10 p.m., while Chloe was still at Jenny's place trying to figure out what to do next, the cops showed up at the apartment. The timing was perfect. She was there dealing with the empty apartment situation when they knocked on the door with an arrest warrant. Jenny called me at 10:30. completely freaking out. They arrested her, Simon. Actually arrested her with handcuffs and everything. What did she do? I explained about the corporate credit card fraud, the $3,200 in unauthorized charges, how she'd been lying about business expenses for months while stealing from my employer. She's been using your work credit card for personal stuff, spa days, expensive dinners, shopping trips, all while telling my company they were client meetings. Jenny went quiet again. I thought you were paying for all that stuff. I thought I was too. Turns out she was just stealing it. The arrest made the local news the next day, not because Chloe was famous, but because credit card fraud cases involving corporate accounts sometimes get picked up by business reporters. Seeing her mugshot online was surreal as hell. She made bail Tuesday morning, but the damage was done. Her job fired her immediately when they found out about the arrest. Something about maintaining client trust and company reputation. Blake apparently stopped returning her calls after the whole thing became public. Turns out his company wasn't thrilled about their sales manager being associated with someone who'd just been arrested for fraud. The legal case took months to wrap up, but Chloe eventually pleaded guilty to avoid jail time. She had to pay full restitution plus fines, which basically destroyed her financially. Her credit was ruined. She couldn't find decent work with a fraud conviction, and she ended up moving back in with her parents, 3 hours away. Meanwhile, my company actually gave me a promotion for handling the fraud situation professionally and protecting company assets. I'm doing better at work than I have in years, honestly. Turns out I'm way more productive when I'm not constantly stressed about relationship drama. Last I heard, Chloe was working at some call center and posting Instagram stories about toxic exes and learning to trust again. Blake got engaged to someone else 6 months after the Cabo trip. Funny how that worked out. The crazy thing is, I don't even feel angry about it anymore. 5 years felt like forever when I was living through it. But looking back, I can see all the red flags I ignored. The way she'd dismiss my concerns, make me feel paranoid for having normal expectations, prioritize everyone else over me. She showed me exactly who she was, and I finally had the sense to believe her.